Hello and welcome to session number 12 of FileMaker Group Therapy for Citizen Developers. My name is Tim Jones. Our topic for this session is value list functions and text parsing. On the agenda for today, we'll learn how to package and pass multiple values into scripts. In that, we'll learn how to use the list function to create value lists, the GetValue function to extract one single item from a value list. We'll learn the LeftValues, RightValues, and MiddleValues functions to extract multiple values from a value list. We'll also look at the value count function, which returns the number of items in a value list. Then we'll turn our attention to how to parse strings of text, how to slice and dice strings of text using the left function, right function, middle function, the position function, and the length function to do so. So let's get started. We're going to begin with a study of the list function. Now, the list function creates a value list, a return-delimited list. Let's say that we ran the list function and we fed it these 5 arguments, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon. It would return a list like this, a carriage return delimited list of those 5 items. Or more accurately, it would return it like this. Now, this is how we need to start thinking of value lists in terms of these calculation functions that we'll be studying today. We need to think of them horizontally rather than vertically, even though everything in our nature screams to think of lists vertically. If you think of them horizontally, these functions will make a lot more sense. Now, the list function can also be used on related data. In fact, it excels at this. Let's say that we were on a household record and we wanted to extract or retrieve the names of the animals who lived in that household, who belonged to that family or that household. If we run this list function and point it down this relationship from household to the animal table and bring back the value of the name field of the animal, we would get Bubbles, carriage return Fido, carriage return Terrence, or more accurately, horizontally like this, Bubbles, Fido, and Terrence, assuming that the current household record is that of Robin Smith in our animal care database. Once we've got a list created, and we can use these lists in a variety of useful purposes, and we're going to take a look at some of those later on today, we can use the GetValue function, which returns one item specified by index number from a value list. The GetValue function, if we were to run it on my list here that has these 5 items in it, and if we were to tell it to retrieve item number 2, it would of course bring back beta, the second item from my list. If we were to run the GetValue function on my list and retrieve item number 3, it would bring back gamma. And number 4, it would of course bring back delta. So the GetValue function is an extremely useful tool for parsing up or grabbing an individual value out of a value list. You can also use these value list functions, which return one or more items from a value list. Let's take a look at LeftValues, which grabs some values off the left side. That's why you want to think of these as horizontally, or the beginning. Let's say we wanted to grab the 2 leftmost values off of my list, then it would bring back alpha and beta. Likewise, we could use RightValues to grab the 2 rightmost. Delta and epsilon would be retrieved then. How about MiddleValues? Starting at the 3rd item and grabbing 2, it would start at gamma, the 3rd item, and grab 2, gamma and delta, giving us this result here. I want you to pay special attention to the trailing carriage returns that are included in these results. These value list functions, unlike the GetValue function, the previous one, will always include a trailing carriage return. And it turns out to be a really good thing because it's consistent. And if you're wondering, what if the value list doesn't have a trailing carriage return after the item? For example, here, after the last item of a value list, there is no carriage return in the actual list, in the source data. Even in that case, there would be a trailing carriage return appended to the end of the result of this RightValues function or LeftValues or MiddleValues. Okay, so pay special attention to that fact. Another value list function is called value count. The value count function returns the number of items in a value list. For example, value count on my list, of course, would bring back 5 because there are 5 items in this list. All right, let's take a look at passing and parsing multi-value script parameters into a script, which is one of, I think, the most useful purposes for these value lists that we can create. I'll switch into our FileMaker database, animal care that we've been working with. And just to give a little bit of background, we've been working on some scripts in our last couple of sessions that generate reports. One script here, for example, the generate treatment invoice script that finds the right records and takes us to the right layout and sorts those records in the right order. And then it calls another script here to output the report on screen or in print, or to save it as a PDF, whichever the user specifies. This output report script here. But now, as we envision, oh, and I should say also that we automated the save records as PDF script step to use as its file name a script parameter that we've passed into this script, right? Here we go, getting a script parameter that's passed into this output report script that we actually initially passed into the first script right here, also as a script parameter from the button or the command that called it. We gather that file name that the user wanted to give, or that we as the developers assigned to the button, whichever the case may be, to the script parameter. It comes in, and then we pass it along as we call the output report script, passing along that file name variable. But now, as we envision the additional reports that we'll want to generate out of this database, we see that we will need even more flexibility in our output report script, including a way to specify if this save as PDF script step should include all the records in the current found set or only the current record. Let me show you what I mean. The save records as PDF script step has a number of options that we can specify, but this option here, whether we're going to include all the records in the current found set or just the current record in the outputted PDF file, is not something that we can specify as some calculation. This options button has nothing to do with this choice here of how many records are going to be included in the PDF. This options button is all about document meta tags, security, and the starting view of the PDF. So what we're going to have to do is actually have 2 save records as PDF script steps. One that's set to include all the records in the current found set, and another that's set to just include the current record. And then we will couch or enclose those save records as PDF commands into conditional if statements. And so we're going to come up with a way to be able to pass that information into this output report script so that it can be more versatile. I'm going to start by renaming the script because, as you know already, my habit is to include in the name of the script the fact that this script expects some incoming script parameters. So we've already named it in such a way that it reminds me that I need to pass in the name of the file that's to be used. Okay, great. But now we're also going to create a script parameter, so to speak, for multiple records. That is, will this report include multiple records or just one? And my plan for this one is just to use a 0 or a 1. Multiple records being set to 0 if it should just include one output record, just the current record setting on our save records as PDF, or a 1 meaning true if it should include multiple records. We know that in Boolean logic, 0 means false and 1 means true. 0 means off and 1 means on in computer bits. And so that makes good sense to use that kind of a switch or a flag, a 0 meaning no and a 1 meaning yes. Let's say that we also have sometimes the need to append some additional content to the PDF. And so I'm going to create another script parameter called append. And in that script parameter, we'll allow our users, or more specifically ourselves as the developers, to specify whether this particular report should have any of our kind of standard terms and conditions or other boilerplate types of content appended to the end of the report PDF that's being built up. Okay, so now just changing the name of the script doesn't obviously do anything to it to make it handle those incoming script parameters. So now we're going to go and add the necessary code to do so, to handle the necessary script parameters. I'm going to come in here and change this one and say, well, instead of calling this file name, let's call it $param as just the general name for the script parameter, which will now, as we know, expect or should include 3 items, 3 entries, 3 pieces of information instead of just 1. Then below that, I'll do another set variable script step, and we'll call this one $file name. And with this one, we'll use that GetValue function, the GetValue function, to there, not get and then parentheses value like we use so many times, right? The wonderful get functions, all of these, that's not what this GetValue function is. Rather, it's GetValue there. It asks us, okay, what's your list and which number item do you want to grab? Well, our list is that variable that I just called param. And for the value number, let's grab the first item out of that list. The first item out of that list should be, if we're using this correctly, should be the file name. Let me widen this a little bit so we can see there. That's the order in which we expect those incoming script parameters. In fact, really, I should add a little bit to my comment here, shouldn't I? Because another thing that we do as a habit here is we specify in a comment at the top of the script what parameters this script expects to receive in. All right, so we've handled our file name parameter. That's going to be the first item in the list. And then multiple records will be the next one. I'll just duplicate this script step, edit, duplicate step, and double click it. And let's change its name to multiple records. And all we need to do here is say, let's grab item number 2 out of that parameter list. And in the same way, we'll duplicate that script step again and double click it. And we'll call this one append. And we'll grab item number 3 using the GetValue function out of that script parameter. There we go. Save the script. Okay, now before we move on to the handling of those parameters, let's jump over to the script that's going to call this script, this generate treatment invoice script, and any other scripts that we write later for outputting reports, or for generating reports, I should say. And let's go in and add to our script parameter. From now on, instead of just passing in the file name, let me cut that with Command X. Let's pass in a list of items. Okay, I'll use the list function, and the list function wants us to specify the items that we want. Okay, and the first thing we'll pass in will be that file name, right? That's the first argument that this script expects. Then a semicolon to move on to the next argument. The next argument is going to be that multiple records script step. Well, I know that in this treatment invoice report, there are multiple records needed in the output. So I'm going to put a 1 here, meaning true. In other words, yes, please do include multiple records, not just the current record. And a semicolon again. And then the last one is append. Now, there are several different boilerplate kinds of layouts that we can use, but I'm going to use the one that's our terms and conditions. And so let's say I just pass in kind of as a keyword or a buzzword for that. I pass in the word terms, meaning append the terms and conditions layout to that PDF that you're building up. And we could have all sorts of other keywords that we use here for other appended bits to the reports. Okay, we'll say okay. And so what that's going to do is it's going to create a carriage return delimited list of the file name, the number 1, and the word terms. I'll save that script. And we'll come back into our output report script. And now we'll start to do things with those incoming script parameters. Okay, for example, we've got if they chose to output the report on screen, then don't do anything special because it's already there. Otherwise, if they've chosen to output it in print form, then print it. Otherwise, and now everything inside the rest of the else block is the PDF branch of that conditional. Okay, so we'll say else, and then we're going to add an if multiple records. Well, let's do it here after we've grabbed the file, after we've set the file path. We'll say if they specified to print multiple records. So I'll restate the name of that variable $multiple records that was created here on line 10. And we could certainly put a 1 here, right? But what's so cool about Boolean logic, 0 means false and 1 means true in Boolean logic. And so literally you can say if multiple records, and if it's a 1, and it will be, you know that I just told it to pass in a 1 from the previous script, then that means true. And if it's a 0, that means false. And that satisfies the if condition. All it wants is a statement that's either true or false. That's all we need. Okay, so if it wants multiple records, then we're going to use this save records as PDF script step. Else, we're going to want a copy of this save records as PDF script step that's set to output just the current record. And so I'll duplicate that save records as PDF script step. We'll move it into the else block, and we'll change its options to just output the current record. Everything else about the save records as PDF command is going to work great in terms of where the file will be saved. It'll go into the file path variable, which was, we worked on that last time. That's right here. We're specifying to save it out to the desktop and so forth. Okay. All right. Now we've got the original PDF built, right? So either multiple records or 1 record. We come down after this end if, and then let's deal with the appendage part. Okay, we'll say if, and then we'll use that variable $append that was defined up here on line 11. If $append equals quote terms, then do the following things. Okay, first we'd want to jump over into our terms layout. So I'll use a GTL go to layout to have the script take us over to our terms and conditions layout, which is here. So we'll jump over there, and then I love this. We'll use the save records as PDF command, SRAP, save records as PDF, no dialog, no folders, to append a new page or pages to the existing PDF using as the output file the exact same path, $file path, that the original PDF was stored in. I love this. You can use the file path to specify where the PDF gets stored, and then you can use it again to specify where it is stored, right? There. And specifying options, current record only in that case, because it's a 1-page PDF, and all that I'm sure is fine. I don't like the pages panel, so I'll just say pages only. Okay, so that is going to say if they've specified that the terms and conditions report page should be appended to the end of the PDF that was generated here or here, then go ahead and do so. Now we will have taken them to another layout, and so of course let's take them back with a go to layout, original layout. All right, we'll save the script and let's test it out. I'll do it, of course, with the script debugger and data viewer running so we can watch the fascinating details as they come along. We'll go to our actions menu here and run our invoice PDF script. And in the script debugger, it intercepts the call to that script and says, oh, you want to perform the generate treatment invoice script? And yes, we do, of course. And so we'll step into it. Also notice that in the call stack down at the bottom of the script debugger, it tells you the exact value of the script parameter that was passed in. Right? You see it here in square brackets. So that's kind of cool that we can see that the command that I just clicked on is sending in this string of text to be used as the file name. All right, our script startup script is going to be called, which is at the beginning of every one of my scripts, to set error capture to on, allow user abort off, and to close this popover back here or any other popover that might have been opened. Fantastic. And now we're going to grab that incoming script parameter and store it as a variable called file name. There it is. Then we'll check to see if there are any related treatment line records. Apparently there are. We'll go to them using go to related record. That generates this. It popped it open into a new window, by the way, but that's hard to tell because the new window is right on top of the other. But now we'll go through and sort the records, set the page setup correctly to letter size, paper, and portrait, enter preview mode, and then we'll run my little size and center window script that does all sorts of magic with that window to just get it into the middle of the screen at the right size. There we go. And now we're back to the generate treatment invoice script now that size and center window has completed. And now we're calling our output report script and we're passing in the file name variable, invoice for treatment of bubbles on 418, and the number 1, meaning we do need multiple records printed, and the word terms, meaning we do want the terms and conditions appended. All right, so we'll step into that. Script startup, I'm going to go ahead and let that happen, but I don't need to take you in there because you already saw it. And now it starts to get interesting. So we'll set the variable called param to equal the incoming script parameter. And there it is. Let me show you that. As you double click, you can see that it's a 3-line entry. It's a value list, a carriage return delimited list. Now I know I taught you to think of value lists horizontally, but the data viewer doesn't do that. It shows them as they're as they appear in text with carriage returns. Okay, so we got those 3 items, each on its own line. It's a carriage return delimited value list. Now we'll start to parse that up. We'll grab the first value using GetValue out of that param list, grabbing the first value, and boom, a new variable called file name that just has the first item. And boom, another variable called multiple records that just has the second item, which was our number 1, meaning yes, we want multiple records. And boom, the third item, append, that has the word terms in it. So that, folks, right there is just, I think, a really wonderful way to be able to pass multiple bits of information into a script to make our scripts more versatile. As we continue on, we'll say, we'll see our dialog, and definitely we'll choose the PDF option there. And we grab their result and store it in a variable called output. I clicked button number 3, the PDF button. If I clicked button number 1, do this. Otherwise, if I clicked button number 2, do that. Otherwise, I must have clicked button number 3. And so now we go on about our business. We'll save. Let me get this so we can see what's coming up. We'll save the variable or create a variable called file path that takes the file name and tucks it into a longer path that is prefixed with the keyword file, then desktop, and then finally the file name yada yada .pdf. Okay. If that multiple records variable contains a 1, or if this statement is true, then do this. And this was the one where it's going to save all the records being browsed. I'll go ahead and jump into that. That'll take a second as it generates the PDF. Okay, there's the PDF. I'll close out of that because there's more work to be done. Otherwise, if multiple records was a 0, it would have done this other one. Okay, now we run another if the append variable contains the word terms, and we know that it does right here. We can see that in our data viewer. Then go to the layout called terms and conditions. Boom, there it is. And save that as a PDF, appending it to the end of the PDF that was born here back on line 21. Okay, and I'd not set that one to automatically open, so that's why it's not popping open automatically, which is great. And then we'll say go to layout, original layout, to take them back to there. And I think that's it. That kind of wraps it up. We'll exit the script, passing back what output form they chose, takes us back and just checks to see what output option they chose and displays a message to that effect. All right, cool. I'll open up the PDF, which should be sitting on my desktop. And there it is. And we notice that it's got the invoice and then it's got the terms and conditions page. Fantastic. All right. Now let me show you along those same lines another use that I make of value lists, and it's for navigation. Here's a little database that's kind of a template that I use on databases that I build for clients. Okay, and these days everybody wants a back button in their software applications and even in their database solutions. Because their web browsers have back buttons. All right, we can give them a back button. In order to do so, what I've done is made my navigation scripted, entirely scripted. Every time the user runs around into different areas of the database using this navigation bar and the links on it, I keep a track of the layout that they've been in. And let me just open up the data viewer again. I keep track of it in this global variable called $layout history. Now I just opened this database and I haven't wandered around anywhere. So the layout history variable at this point only contains the name of the layout, home menu desktop, which is the current layout that you're seeing now. But watch as I start jumping around. Maybe I'll resize this a little bit. That's not going to be as interesting. It needs to be wide so you can see. As I start jumping around in the database, I'll click on the alpha button at the bottom and we go to the alpha list, and notice how alpha list desktop, which is the name of this layout, was just prepended or added to the beginning of that layout history global variable. And likewise, I'll go over here to delta, and delta list desktop, the name of this layout, was just added at the beginning of the layout history. And likewise, I'll jump around to beta and gamma, and maybe I'll go back to alpha, and you can see that the layout history list, I'll double click on it, is just growing and growing every time the user navigates from layout to layout. Okay, and if they jump into a particular record, let's say they go into this one, that takes them to a layout as well. So literally every navigation click that a user can make in this database is run through the same script that does all the work of processing what layout they want it to go to, but it also prepends the name of that layout into this global variable that just keeps growing and growing. So now, if somebody wants to go back, if they want to work their way back through the layouts that they visited, all we need to do is remove the first item from the list and then take them to the new first item. If we lop off alpha form desktop, then alpha list desktop is the first item in the list, and we can say, all right, go to the first item in our layout history. And that's exactly what happens when the user clicks this back button. Watch as I click it, it'll take us back to alpha list desktop, and alpha form desktop was removed from the list. I'll show you the script that manages that. It's this nav go to previous layout script. And it says basically, hey, set the variable $$ layout history, right? That's the variable that I was just showing you that's keeping that long growing list. Set that to be equal to, and then I use that MiddleValues function that I showed you earlier on the slide. MiddleValues, there are several ways I could have done it, of course, but MiddleValues just says, okay, set this layout, or sorry, we're setting the variable layout history to be equal to what's currently in layout history, but starting at the second item and grab all the way until the last item. So if it was, let me use our Greek names again, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon. If that was the list, it says, I'll just type those so you can see them. Alpha, beta, yeah, wouldn't you know it? Gamma, delta, epsilon. So MiddleValue says, okay, starting at the second value, this one here, and going through the last value. Now the list could be any length long, and that's why this value count function is so useful, because it will tell me how many items are in the list, or in that layout history list. So if there are 5 items in the list, it says, all right, take the layout history variable and set it to be equal to the layout history variable, but starting at its second item and going through its 5th item. Set it to be equal to those. It effectively knocks off the first item in the list. All right, so that's what that does. And then we say, okay, now that we've lopped off the first item from our layout history, now go to the layout that's the first item in the layout history variable. Okay, so go to layout, and with go to layout, you can specify which layout you want to go to by creating a calculation that results in the name of a valid layout. And in this case, it's simply, well, get value number 1 off of our layout history list. Okay. So that's another useful way to use value lists in your FileMaker databases. Now, let's turn our attention to text parsing functions. Text parsing functions like these. Presume that there's a field or a variable called myText that contains this: Salem, comma, space, Oregon, space 97302, which, by the way, is my hometown. Okay, so let's assume that we've got that field or variable, and we need to grab just the city name out of it. Well, we could do that using the left function. The left function's job is to grab the leftmost X number of characters, here 5, for example, right? Grab the leftmost X number of characters off of that text. And so let me switch to my pen. And so if we say grab 5 characters off of this my text, it's going to grab the leftmost 5 there. Well, what if we needed the zip code? Well, then we could use the right function to say, okay, grab the rightmost 5 characters off of my text. And of course, we'd get these guys here, just the rightmost 5 characters. What about the state? Well, we can use the middle function to say, okay, grab some text out of the middle of my text, starting at the 8th character, and grab 2 characters. So we'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, spaces count. Spaces are just as important as other characters. So the space was at 7. The state name starts at the 8th, and we said starting at the 8th, grab for 2 characters, and we'd get Oregon or OR. Fantastic. The position function becomes useful in situations like this, because what if you have a whole bunch of hometowns to process and the city names are all of differing lengths? Well, if there's a comma after the city name, you can use the position function, or if there's any character that's reliably after the city name, spaces wouldn't really be appropriate, because some city names have spaces in them, like Long Beach or Corona del Mar. But if there's a reliable comma or some other character as the landmark at the end of each city part of the hometown, you can use that using the position function to say, search through my text, find a comma. This is, by the way, a comma surrounded in quotation marks, because it's a literal in the formula. You have to enclose it in quotes. and start the search at the first character position of my text and return the position of the first instance of a comma that you find, that would bring back the number 6, because if we count again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the comma was found at the 6th character position. Well, we can use that then to determine how long the city name is, because the city name is always 1 character less in length than the position of the comma. So we could say -1, right? And get our length of our city name, which we could then feed into this argument right here, feeding all of this position of the comma -1 into the left function, and that would nicely return the city name, no matter how many characters the city name was in length. Speaking of length, there's one more function here in the text parsing that I wanted to talk about, and that is the length function itself. The length function simply returns how many characters there are in the text string. So in this whole text string, there are 15 characters. Spaces and commas and all that, of course, count. The quotation marks do not count. They're simply wrapped around the string. So we get a 15 there. All right, let me do a little demonstration in FileMaker on this. We'll jump back into our animal care database. And I'm just going to open the data viewer again, because it gives us the wonderful ability to play with expressions. Notice I click the Watch tab of the data viewer and then hit the plus sign to jump into editing an expression. Now I've got some text already for us that I'm just going to copy and paste to save some typing time. Let's say that this is the expression, and I'll get rid of, and let me get rid of this much here. Okay. All right. So I'm using the let function, which, as you know, we talked about this in one of the earlier sessions. The let function lets us create temporary function variables. We created a function variable called text and said, let that be equal to Salem, Oregon 97302. And then let there also exist a variable called comma, where we use that position function to go and find where the comma is inside that text, right? So this call to text is a reference to this text variable here. Find a comma starting at the first character position and returning information about the first comma that you find. If I then ask for, what is the value of comma, it comes back with a 6, just like I promised. What if we said comma -1? It would come back with a 5, which is exactly the length of the city name. What if we were talking about a different city name? What if it wasn't Salem? What if it was Long Beach, California, 90802? Well, notice how the result changed to 10 because the comma is now at the 10th position. So really flexible. All right, what about this? What if we wanted to bring back the city name, not just the position of the comma or comma -1? So here we could use the left function and say, okay, go grab out of the text variable, go grab X number of characters. How many? Well, whatever position the comma was at, -1. And there you get your good result. Again, regardless of how long the city name is, as long as there's a comma there dependably, you can use this kind of formula logic to extract just the city portion. And I'm using hometowns, of course, as the example, but there are so many myriad opportunities to use these text parsing functions. If we wanted to grab the zip code, that would look maybe something like, the state, that would look something like this. We could use the middle function to grab some text out of the middle of text, Long Beach, California, and we'd say, well, since the comma is always 2 characters before the state, we could say comma +2, start grabbing there and grab for 2 characters, and it would grab just the state portion. Lastly, the zip code. We could use the right function to say grab the rightmost 5. That's an easy one because the zips are all the same length. Now, if you had zips and zips +4, then you'd need some more logic in there, of course. All right, but that's some practical use of those text parsing functions. Switch back here. There we go. All right. Are there any questions about value list functions, multi-value script parameters, or the text parsing functions?